What's going on, guys? My name's Mac, coming to you with another video. Today I'm going to talk about something that puzzles me nearly every day, that I seem to think about all the time, but I don't hear anyone else speak of it quite in these terms. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard anyone else even think it. Furthermore, even if someone else were to think it, they wouldn't think it's as puzzling as me, and I just don't know why. So I'll begin with a story here. On May 18th, 1565, the Knights of St. John stood alone on the island of Malta, just 6,700 men, as 100,000 Ottoman troops arrived to crush them. The Turks brought cannons, fleets, and the power of their best soldiers. As the months progressed, the Knights held every fort, every wall, and every stone. Fort St. Elmo fell only after its last defender was slain, buying time for the rest to fight on. Day after day, the Knights hurled back wave after wave of attackers, killing tens of thousands, burning ships, and breaking their morale. By September, the Ottomans fled, broken, defeated, and humiliated. The Knights had not only survived, they destroyed the strongest army on earth. Malta became a symbol of what few brave men can do when they choose honor over life. Now, what I find so interesting about stories like this is, one, it doesn't feel like that long ago, but two, these men lived relatively similar lives as we do today. Contrary to what you're told, their lifespans were relatively similar to ours, or basically the exact same. A lot of people in the Knights of St. John were 70 years old, even 60. It was very common for people to be of that age. And for the most part, throughout all of history, people have generally just lived to around 70. And yeah, a lot of the things that these people experienced is basically the same as what we experience. You know, they got sick the same way people get sick today. When you get sick today, you kind of just have to live through it, right? You just have to sit through it. There's really no cheat codes for being sick. I mean, there's minor ailments that relieve the pain of being sick, but you can't really skip it. A lot of times you have to sweat it out anyway, you know? And, Western medicine has perhaps eased the experience mildly, but you haven't really cheated the system yet, right? Like, people still get sick the same way. These people back then, they wanted the same things we wanted, right? They wanted evolutionary advantages over their environments. They wanted to procreate. They wanted monopoly on violence, and they wanted, excess resources for security, right? It's really not all that different than how we are today. And yeah, they just lived mostly the same amount. They probably had the same impulses, roughly the same experiences. Now, what I find so puzzling if you had went to one of these people and you had told them, hey, one day, we will be able to communicate with each other across the world in seconds or in real time. They'd say, well, that's weird, but yeah, I could see it. It would be very weird, right? It would intrigue them, I'm sure, but it's not something that is beyond their comprehension, right? It's not really beyond their comprehension. Similarly, airplanes is like sort of in the same camp, where like if you told them the airplane was a thing, I don't think they would not be able to imagine an airplane. Surely they'd be able to imagine an airplane, right? Like, they had ships, it adds up that they'd be able to imagine an airplane. The same way like you today can imagine, space travel, or even being a Dyson sphere, although it may be difficult to fully imagine what it's like to be a Dyson sphere. You can at least try to imagine it, or at the very least have some idea of what that'll be like, right? And the things that goes into that. Wormholes. similarly, if someone says, hey, from my time period, we have ways of breaking through large distances in space by exploiting, a feature of physics, it's really not beyond your comprehension that what that would be like is the thing, right? Like what it would actually be like. I think that is something that people from our time, despite not having that technology to do that, it's not really outside of our comprehension of like what that experience would really be like, right? But for all the things we have today, there is essentially nothing that I don't think the Knights of St. John, if you went up to them, told them, hey, this is what we have, that they wouldn't be able to imagine, or that after a little bit of thought, they couldn't roughly, think about what that experience would be like, or this, that, or the other thing, right? Like they would, for the most part, be able to understand what that experience is like, right? But there is one thing in particular about modernity that no matter how much you tried to explain to them what this experience is like, they would never be able to actually, experience it or even understand anything remotely close to it. And I don't hear anyone else mention this, and I think it's the most profound thing ever, and that is the sound of modern music. All men from history lived roughly similar lives to ours, just with slightly decreased technology. However, there are countless men who walked this earth who could never even have imagined what this sound sounded like. Essentially, there is nowhere in nature where sounds like this exist. And without computing and modern technology, that sound literally couldn't possibly exist. Now, that's not really the right way to think about it, because technically the sound was always there, but humans hadn't really unlocked it, which is one of the most intriguing parts about this whole concept, right? It's like there was, people who roamed the lands for, thousands of years, and there was technically a sensory experience that they could had experienced the entire time that they didn't even realize was possible, right? And it's almost like we unlocked a part of reality when we made computing in this way. And it doesn't seem to weird anyone out. In fact, most people prefer to listen to music that has sounds limited to sounds that we had before computing. I would argue almost all of rock and roll or these other generic music genres that exist are just variations of sounds that could have and realistically did exist for tens of thousands of years. Music dates back really far. They used to have bone flutes even like 35,000 years ago. And they didn't have much back then, but they still had music. Music dates back far, and the sounds that they could have created were extremely limited. And, for every single modern invention that exists, there's nothing you could have went to them and told them, hey, this thing exists, and they couldn't have imagined it. They couldn't even have imagined it, literally. No, of course, they would be able to imagine it with enough thought, enough description, enough communication, they would get it. But this sound, unless you went to them with this sound and played this sound, they could never have even imagined that this sound existed. Like within the universe, within all of the things that were possible within the universe, they couldn't even have imagined that this sound was a thing. And people just walk around in modern day and they don't even listen to stuff like this. They don't even think it's crazy. They don't even have a preference toward it. It doesn't trip them out. It doesn't surprise them in any way. It just, people consider it an option to listen to modern music. They think it's purely optional. They don't in any way revel in the fact that this is a profound discovery of modernity, and I can't listen to anything but this, literally. It's almost like any sound that could have existed pre-computing isn't interesting to my brain, right? And to take this concept a step further, to me, the most mysterious part about this concept is, and now that I've laid it out to you and that you understand this concept, there's almost a more eerie part of this, which only I have thought about because I'm the only one who's really ever mentioned this concept as a whole, which is, if this happened once, couldn't it be possible that it could happen again? Isn't it possible that this sort of musical mindturbation idea, right? If this happened once and that people walked the earth and there was something underneath their nose, you could call it, underneath their senses the whole time, that's purely unexplainable unless you experience it. If that happened once, surely there's more things like that. Like, what if there are sensory experiences that our body could experience that we just haven't invented yet? Like, we don't have the necessary technology to experience physical sensations. Like, there could be an array of physical sensations that we just have never experienced. No human on Earth has ever experienced because we haven't created the necessary technology to interact with the five senses in that way. That could be both taste, that could be taste, it could be hearing, it could be visual, right? Anything. There could be an array of sensory experiences that it really belongs in this category of, you can't even really imagine what this feeling will be like. There are probably thousands of experiences, physical experiences, that realistically haven't even been unlocked with the human body, that are just beneath like cause and effect. They're just beneath anything we can do to create them, that we just haven't even found yet, right? Similar to, there's no one in history who ever heard a song like this or could have even imagined that this sound existed. Similarly, I think there is potentially an array of physical experiences that we haven't experienced yet, that we could have been experiencing the whole time, but we just didn't even know. We just didn't even know that it was possible. So I find this to be quite profound. It's like this darker, deeper layer of reality that it's almost like the real abyss. The real abyss is not wormholes or space travel or brain implants, although I do think brain implants could lead to experiencing some of these sensory experiences. It's not things you could imagine. It's these profound technologies that interact with the brain in such a way where it produces a sensory experience that you really can't be explained it. You can't be explained that sound could exist, that taste could exist, that feeling could exist, right? There is just nothing like it in nature, and unless we create the technology, then you'll be like, oh yeah, that feeling, I know that feeling. There wasn't a word for it. There wasn't an idea for it. There wasn't anything. There's just like how for thousands of years, there were these sounds that essentially no one could have experienced. There may be all kinds of sensory experiences beneath the hood that are possible that we just haven't unlocked the technology yet to experience. And I find this to be an incredibly profound idea that the few times I've tried to explain it to people, they just don't find it crazy. They don't completely wallow in the delight of modern music, probably because it's in part degenerate, just due to the times. It didn't necessarily come at the most convenient time, right? But, you know, they don't wallow in it. The one thing we really unlocked, they don't wallow in it. You could call it modern chiptune, if you want to call it that. But they also don't really dream about what's beyond and what else could be possible with the brain, or enhancements made to the brain to unlock new sensory experiences that had never been experienced before. So if you found this interesting, let me know in the comments, and let me know if you agree with the concept or you think it's as profound as me. And until next time.